The Bills can clinch their first AFC East title since the year before Josh Allen was born. So what would it mean to the franchise? Plus, why this game is tougher than it looks for the Bills on Saturday in Denver. And oh boy, the national media now loves the Bills. Should we care? That's all coming up on this week's edition of the Buffalo Plus podcast.
All right, welcome back to the Buffalo Plus podcast presented by BuffaloPlus.com. Mike Catalana, Dan Fetes. I am Jenna Cottrell. The Buffalo Bills 10-3 on the season, picking up that primetime win against the Steelers. They're in that contention. They can clinch the AFC East title, Mike, on Saturday with a win. You've covered this team for quite some time. Not saying you're old, not saying you're young. But what would it mean for this franchise to get that first title win since 95?
Well, when they were good before you took it for granted, they were going to win the division title. I mean, they were rarely a wild card. They would always seem to win the AFC East. They were the best team. Their goal was to get back to the Super Bowl. They kept doing it. So AFC East titles became like, okay, think about it. The last time they did it, it wasn't even Jim Kelly's last year. It was his next to the last season. And then you've gone through all this mess for all this time. Look, it should be goal number one for every team to win the division because it guarantees you're in the playoffs and it guarantees you a home game. And it is the goal. And I think it's been their goal. So I think it means a ton, big picture for the franchise. But I think it means even more right now that this is it's got to be step number one to what they were hoping to accomplish this year. And they got it done.
Yeah, I think it validates them. I think it validates Sean McDermott's hire. I think it validates some of the moves that he has made. It validates Brandon Beane and them drafting Josh Allen. It validates just all of the process that they have talked about and finding a way and all the cliches. They've all worked. All the kumbaya stories that they've shared around at locker rooms or in training camps, it's all built to this. So it goes to show you that there may not be necessarily that quick fix. I think especially in the NFL, it just doesn't happen like that. In the NBA, you can rebuild in a year by getting two superstars and then boom, you're a championship contender. It's not like that in the NFL, and it hasn't been like that in Buffalo. But it's another. Jenna, what were you saying earlier? It's another page in the chapter, like that. This is moving forward.
I feel like it turns the page from the Bills being struggling for so long and the years of embarrassment and the jokes and, the low-hanging fruit of making fun of the team to now being like, wow, this team is doing something that is catching everyone's attention. Yeah. And it's taking down, look, we know the Patriots are not what they used to be, but still even being able to dethrone them in that sense is just huge. It shows the progress that this team has been able to do. And that progress is, Mike, as you know, is not guaranteed and hasn't been guaranteed for some time.
And you made a good point bringing up the Patriots, right? Because this is not a normal division where everybody seems to take their turn. It goes back and forth. Yeah. Maybe there's one or it could be two teams that just don't seem to get it done. Like the NFC North, right? Where it seems to always be Green Bay and Minnesota's in there and occasionally Chicago and Detroit's. But no. Everybody loses. New England wins, right? Mm-hmm. Right now. For this year and this time in 2020, the Bills are on the top. New England is dead. They're not making the playoffs. They're certainly, obviously, now not winning the division. So for a year, the Bills can do it. It's been 2 decades of New England every year. And Dan, we would always talk about like the goal realistically, you could say it was to win the division. The goal was to somehow get in the playoffs. Right. McDermott's gotten them there now 3 times in 4 years. That progression is impressive. And it coincided with New England, starting to fall.
Yeah, and I think it's just, it's that to-do list that McDermott and Beane have kind of built. And it's like playoffs, like got it. Like find your quarterback, like pretty much crossed off that list. And now, like I said, and there's Super Bowl there. But, how many times have we heard, even during the bad times when, 2 years ago when they struggled and Josh got hurt and they just didn't have the pieces going, McDermott would constantly always be like, it's a process. Like, take your time. Like, all of these things, like even the hiccups, like they never went like Super Bowl. Like McDermott didn't come in here and go like, we're going to get a Super Bowl. That's our thing. It was like, hey, we're going to turn ourselves into, a winning franchise. And they've done that. So it's another encouraging sign where, it wasn't like Rex coming up and being like, is this thing on? Like, because it's about to be. It was a steady growth that was sustainable. I think that was the big thing. Like this isn't just a hot year where it's like, hey, this unknown running back is now tearing up the league. Like, this is a formula that the Bills have built over the years since they've been there that, Josh Allen talked about it today, that one team has dominated this division. They were the blueprint, and teams have been trying to replicate that. The Bills are hoping that they're onto something, that this isn't just a flash in the pan one year, that this is a long-term success model.
Yeah, we talk about like the window too, but Dan, going back to your point also, I think of the messaging and how the messaging itself in the building has kind of progressed. Originally, it was, trust the process. Then it went to, playoff caliber, things like that actually have coincided with the Bills getting. And now it's like, okay, if Buffalo wins the AFC East, which they're obviously on track to do, it looks like that will be the case. Like, a win in the playoffs is not enough. It's got to be a couple wins because of where this team has stacked up this season. But Mike, I mean, we talk so much about the Patriots and the success that they've had. We talk about the Bills and the blueprint, but how concerned are you that Brian Daboll is a huge part of that blueprint and what the future with him could mean for this team?
Yeah, I mean, this is what happens when your team becomes good. I mean, people start to cherry pick from your staff. And we know Sean McDermott's a big Andy Reid guy, and Andy Reid has seen it, right? His coaches leave to go to Chicago, go to Philly. And it looks like Eric Bieniemy's in a really good spot to leave, too. The difference here is, Andy Reid's an offensive guy and losing offensive guys. Sean could lose his offensive guy. I mean, and Daboll runs the offense. And I know that they have a quality staff and all those things, but he's built up a lot. I will say this. I think he's gotten Josh Allen to the point where I don't expect it to be disaster if Daboll leaves, because Josh Allen has that confidence. I think there's a lot they can build on. It's not like, 1 year in or two. And look, I'll use the example of Wentz when Frank Reich left. I mean, Wentz had only really had 2 seasons in the league and big success, and then he was coming off an injury and all those things. Where you look at Allen now, he's progressed 3 straight years, and he's more stable that way with Daboll. How about that?
I was thinking a baby bird. Finally, like he's ready to fly. Like that Daboll has groomed him enough, has shown him how to deal with tough times and slow starts and bad turnovers. And I just think back to last year, in years past when Daboll was on the sideline just ripping into him sometimes after plays. And then I remember him after the Cincinnati game, hugging him, and rejoicing after last year's game. Like, they've shared all of those moments. And yes, I don't know if it's exactly like a continual growth of this offense, to being if Daboll leaves, would they be a top 5 offense next year? Probably not. I think there still would be some learning curve, but I think you make a good point, Mike, that Josh has learned enough of the NFL game to the point where he can adjust to whoever comes in next. And it will be a highly sought after offensive coordinator position. I don't think it's a layup to say Ken Dorsey takes the job. I think in years past, they would just be like, well, whoever's in the building, we're just going to keep it as that. I think that this is a highly sought after, high profile job with Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs and this offense, that there will be a lot of names that will want this position when it goes on the market, when Brian Daboll gets a head coaching job, because he will get a head coaching job.
Yeah, it is interesting, though, because now you'd be coming in to be the coordinator where, they've really raised the bar on what they've done. So it's also like there's not a lot. I mean, obviously, there's always ways they can go up. But it's the growth they've had this past year is phenomenal. Yeah. It's going to be hard to do that again. Then you're in Mahomes territory if you do that again. So it's
Carolina
not an easy job.
That will come over. What's the Carolina connection that we can pull from and go, hey, he was there?
I think that well is tapped.
Yeah, it could be.
Although it hasn't been yet, so who knows? Well, first and foremost, the Bills are in control of getting the AFC East title if they win this upcoming Saturday against the Denver Broncos. Denver's 5-8 on the season, but that record does not reflect some of the games that they've played this season. And this is a talented team. Like Drew Lock, he can be a question mark, but this team is better than what their record reflects.
Yeah, the one thing Drew Lock does not lack is confidence. This guy has more confidence. I'll say that he has more confidence coming into this game than Josh Allen. And I think Josh Allen is very confident. That is how delusionally confident Drew Lock is. And he will not be afraid. It's going to be I saw somebody say that it's a completely different dynamic. Obviously, Drew Lock, much more a down the field passer, going to put more stress on the corners and safeties to kind of defend this team. But, dangerous 5-8 team, throw the records out. Like all of those cliches are going to come in because this is a team that can go off. And Vic Fangio is a very good defensive coordinator. So and you're going in, and Mike, you've talked about it leading up into this spot. You've talked about since the beginning of the year, they were going to knock off Pittsburgh at home. And then there's no such thing as a trap game, as we've said. But this is a tough spot to go into dealing with actually where the Broncos hold a home field advantage, even without fans, because of the element.
Yeah, there is stuff. There's something like a trap game. There is. I mean, we all know that it happens.
There's not, though.
And so, Denver, you look at their record. They've had some pretty good wins. They've got 5. I mean, they beat New England. They beat Miami. They beat New England without a touchdown. How about that in that game? And then they were close with Kansas City, close with Pittsburgh, close with Tennessee. I mean, real close games. I mean, they had Kansas City down. I know it's a division rival, but that was a close game. So, in terms of that, and it is the Bills coming off back-to-back prime time national TV wins. And it is set up. This isn't like, well, if you win and 2 other – no. You win the game Saturday, you're division champs. So I think it is another show of growth from this team. I was looking back on what they've done. I mean, it's really impressive. They're 10-4 in the last 2 years on the road. I mean, that is not easy to do. And it'd be easy to dismiss going on the road about not fans. I get that part. But we saw them do it last year with the fans. And even with, a tougher schedule and all those things. But 10-4 on the road. I think the only team better than them over that period of time, not surprising, is Kansas City. But that's impressive. So they've done a good job of that. But I think, this Denver team is one of those that we always look at this part of the year and you go like, what do teams have to play for? They're all playing for jobs, man. Drew Lock wants to show them that he can be.
Fangio wants to keep his job. They're all playing. This is, again, Drew Lock's playing to be the starting quarterback next year.
Yep. Yeah, so I think it is a dangerous game. And I asked McDermott today about the altitude only because, it is a physical thing. And I think players get it. And I looked back at his history and I found, as best I could, it looked like twice. Like once when he was in Philly and then once when he was with Carolina, the year they played them in the Super Bowl, that they played in Denver. And it is different. And I do think it's a physical thing, but I also believe it can be a mental thing for players. Like you go in there thinking that, why am I feeling different? Why is it, do I need to adjust? The only reason I bring that up is it really is, I mean, you can say like you play in the Superdome because of the atmosphere, the way it is, all those things. This is a physical difference. It's like if you're not used to playing in the super hot conditions, Miami has that edge sometimes when they play those games at home or really cold, like you can have in Buffalo or Green Bay. So I think it does make it a little bit different, fans or no fans.
And Miami always does that too in December when they pick the sideline that the other team bakes in for the way the sun comes over, and they always have Bill's sideline baking in the sun. So I think I've also done that times too, just being like, how tough is it really playing at Mile High Stadium? And then you just see everybody over at the oxygen tanks throughout the games on the sidelines, and you're like, something. It is something.
Dan, last week you were concerned about the Steelers being sluggish, considering everyone, Mike and I, thought they would be motivated. You expected them to be a bit sluggish because of their schedule, because of the injuries.
They were motivated. They just weren't good enough.
No, they just ran out of steam in the second half because they were physically exhausted.
Well, that first half wasn't great either. But I mean, do you expect for this Bills team to be a bit sluggish coming off the Sunday night primetime and the fact that they're traveling. And again, like that altitude question is major.
Yeah, it's definitely a concern, but every time the Bills, they've done such a good job at staying balanced between the highs and the lows. And I go back to the win over Seattle, and I thought that was such a massive win. We said that was probably one of the biggest wins for this organization under Sean McDermott since the Cowboys win on Thanksgiving. Just what it did for the media to beat Seattle and the MVP and the 6-1 Seahawks and all that stuff. And I was worried about them then going to play Arizona the next week, another dangerous team. They would have to get up for it again. And they did. They lost on a Hail Mary, whatever. But they were still in that game. They were mentally focused to face Kyler Murray and a really good offense. So I look at this game where you're coming off 2 primetime games. Could there be a little bit of a letdown? Yeah, I think that's a possibility. But everything that's come out of this organization was, the Bills weren't ecstatic or over the moon that they had just knocked off the 11-1 Steelers. The mood in the locker room, we all asked the guys, was another win. And that's what it felt like. This wasn't like when they left the field against the Vikings, when they beat them as 17-point underdogs and said, like, none of you picked us. Like, oh, how about that? Like, that was none of that. This was a team that expected to win on Sunday night at home. They took care of business with a great second half, and that was it. So I think that they can compartmentalize, like, good win, turn the page. Like McDermott said, we have to reset. Like, and how many times we heard Josh this year go, 7 wins doesn't give us a division title. 8 wins doesn't give us a division title. 9 wins, like, that's
11 wins could.
Yeah, that's the motto that they've been. So I think they can get up knowing that it would really be kind of a sad trombone noise to win the division if Miami loses on Sunday and you're just sitting at home, the Bills lose to a 5-8 Broncos team, and you're like, division title.
Yeah, not quite the same zip. All right, well, I will say, though, and Mike, we've talked about it earlier, they don't need to win these games in terms of, like, the playoffs. They're basically set. But how important is it in terms of seeding for them?
It's huge. You hear people say things like, doesn't really matter once they win the division. That's ridiculous. Here's what they've got to play for. They have a very legitimate shot to get the 2 seed, right? They beat Pittsburgh head-to-head. If the Bills win out, Pittsburgh loses another game, the Bills are the 2 seed. So what does that mean? Well, first of all, it means you have 1 home game, 2 home games if you win, right? Because 2, it means you're not dropping to the 4th seed, which is also a possibility, which means you would avoid Kansas City until the AFC Championship game. I mean, this is very real. And the other part is, if you're the 2 seed and you win and somehow Kansas City gets beat, you're home. And I know there's no fans, right? But you guys know this. We've seen it all year. You don't want to be dealing with travel. In this COVID world, we've already heard multiple times teams sitting on the tarmac waiting to leave because they had a player test and all the other things you got to deal with. And it's their environment. You look at those environments they'd be playing in, and you guys have been there. You've seen most of them. Nashville, Pittsburgh, places that they could possibly have played. Yep. Kansas City, like, not easy, no matter what. And some of them, I guess Kansas City has some fans. So I think you want to shoot. Look, this doesn't mean you play a guy who's banged up late in the season or whatever. You got to be smart. But I think Josh Allen's playing. I think they got something to play for. And the last thing I was thinking of, picture this circumstance. You could be playing Miami the last week of the year. The Bills have clinched the division. But it could be circumstances that if Miami wins that game, you play them the next week in the first round of the playoffs. Depends on how the seedings go. They get in, you play them. You beat them, you eliminate them. And we've seen this happen. Well, years ago, it's happened with the Bills and the Dolphins, ending the regular season and playing the next week in the playoffs. But I remember a Rex Ryan Jets team that got let into the playoffs by, I'm going to say it was the Bengals. They let them get in. I mean, they didn't play their starters. And then the next week, the Jets went in and beat them. It's 2 straight weeks. So there's a lot of dynamics at play. I guess that was a very long answer to your question. I still think it's important to win without being reckless, but win games, try to win out. I think you try to win out and you're the 2 seed.
I think it's so dangerous to try and take your foot off that gas and then try and get it back into gear. This Bills team has been playing. They're the best when they play aggressive, when they have that edge to them of that underdog of, we're trying to accomplish something. So I agree with Mike that you can't say that there's nothing to play for these last 3 games. Bad take.
No, I completely agree. And you say have to play aggressive, keep your foot on the gas pedal because of the underdog type of mentality that a lot of Bills players carry. And now that they're this close to winning the division and they've had the wins on primetime, like national television, there's a lot of bandwagon fans just jumping on. Does it matter, Mike? Should Bills fans care?
Here's what I would tell Bills fans. The reason the national media likes the Bills so much is because the Bills are really good this year. And here's what I would tell them. Right now, you're up here on this perch because you're winning, and now everybody's jumping on board. Is anybody in the national media talking about the Dolphins? Other than they're better, they look like they might make the playoffs. Tua looks pretty good. It's the way they talked about the Bills last year. So you're not really paying attention to that. The Dolphins are pretty good, and they've got a lot going for them. But if you're a national reporter, national, hot taker, Miami is not that team, right? But they've got something going. So if you're in Miami, you're like, why isn't anybody looking at us? Well, you're not as good as the Bills. I mean, last year the Bills didn't win the division. Nobody was all in on them. Josh hadn't thrown for 300 yards. So he's done all that.
Crazy to think of.
Hey, look, I fell into it a little bit. I got in a little bit with Nick Wright from Fox. But all I said was his point was he basically tried to make the point that Josh Allen hasn't really been anything above mediocre. I'm trying to think of the word he used since September. And he was going just off of stats. But we all know watching Josh, he is look, we're not fanboys here. I think we tell people what we think. The Bills have been really good, and Josh has been really good this year. Yeah. And he's also been named Player of the Week twice since September.
Yeah, 3 times in the season. Yeah, right. And I think that was it. I think that's a great point, Mike. I was overly critical saying when all these people were like, oh, Josh is going to make another step in year 3. It's absolutely going to happen. And it's I was the one trying to be like, hey, hopefully he does. You hope that he becomes that guy. But I was like, I was with you. I was with most of those people going, hasn't thrown for 300 yards yet. What has he really done? And his best games have always been against a bad Miami Dolphins team. He had to really, put on a game because it was inconsistent. That was the big thing. And he has been, his completion percentage is in the top 5 of the league this year, which is a massive jump. It used to be that he was struggled against man coverage. He got way better against man coverage this year. Then he struggled against zone defenses against Kansas City and Tennessee. The last 2 weeks, he's lit up zone coverages. He has been a part of it. And Dan Orlovsky had a great take on it that, today on the Pat McAfee show, again, national media coverage about this Bills team, and just said that Josh Allen's brain has finally caught up with his talent.
That's great.
And I thought that was the first time where it's that's fair. I think that's a fair take that Josh at times was that. What did Chris Long say, Mike? He was a roller coaster ride on meth. That was what it was, and they still joke around about it. One of the things I was listening to, he talked about how Josh Allen was on the Pat McAfee show, and Pat McAfee said, "What were you thinking with that lateral? Dude, what were you have some respect for the football?" And Josh goes "Hey man, if he would have caught that ball, he was gone." And I thought that was the greatest take. He's still going to be who he is, but this take is that there's context in those stats. There's context in everything. So I think they deserve this media attention. I think it's also fun to pub up to it. It's kind of like this offseason when there was nothing going on and we were in COVID, and it was you'd have a couple people be like, the Bills are going to win the division, and it was all right, that's clicks. I get it.
How about the top 100? I'll admit it. Josh made the top 100, and I said, no way. He hadn't deserved that yet. I said I didn't think he was in the top 200 coming into the year because he hadn't progressed past that point. And I don't even know if the team believed that. Look, everybody wanted to get behind him. But, and he was coming off the playoff game where it was rough, and this team had, he had moments, but he wasn't. And his career stats, people get mad, but his career stats were Mitch Trubisky's, right? Very similar.
Yes. Yeah.
Except Josh exploded in year 3, much more like a Mahomes or a Lamar in terms of like massive upgrade. And Mahomes did it really in his first year, but Lamar just made that huge jump in year 2, and Josh did that in year 3. So I mean, Colin Cowherd says they're the best team in the NFL. Well, they're not.
Yeah.
I mean, that's for some clicks, but that doesn't mean you're saying the Minnesota Vikings are the best team in the NFL or the Washington football team. I mean, the Bills aren't. I don't believe they're the best. I think Kansas City is still the best team. But they're at least in the conversation of among the best teams. It's not some wild hot take. So yeah, I'd say the Bills fans enjoy it. But these same people, when they're not good enough, will say the Bills aren't one of those teams. So that's what happens.
I thought coming into this season, I didn't have the Bills with the record that they had. I thought they would have 10 wins on the season because I thought the talent of the teams they were playing was so much better than last year. And that's what worried me so much. But when you see how much this team has transformed and the games that they're putting together and the wins that they are getting, like last year they beat the Steelers, it was Duck Hodges. This year it was Ben Roethlisberger, and the Bills that third quarter really shined. Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, like that talent. And I think what I've learned through this season is that men don't change, but some of them can evolve.
Yes.
So some can evolve, some cannot, but you're always going to see that gamer in Josh. But I was actually very worried at the Steelers game. I was like, ooh, is this going to be time for like hero ball? Things are falling apart. He hasn't settled in yet. But you saw Allen and the offense settle in. And, Brian Dable spoke. He said after the game at halftime, like everyone was calm. And I think it took that progression of like, let's be real. Josh was thrown into the fire his first year. He didn't have the time to really develop. And everyone said, oh, it's that second year when players really take that step forward. Well, that wasn't exactly the case. I think you had to see him take this third year and the experiences that come with it for him to really, like Dan Orlovsky said, have his brain catch up to the talent and the natural talent that he has.
Well, at least he finally did it. I mean, before he was like old at like, what, 25?
Yeah.
I mean,
what else is funny too is that like, Jenna makes a good point. Like Mike and I have said on previous podcasts, that like Josh isn't going to change, but we've seen less hero ball Josh. It's still been there at times. You go back to the Rams game, there were some like head scratching plays and there have been little bits and pieces of it, but it's been much more like leadership ball. It was like step up ball. Like he steps up in those big moments against Arizona. Like that drive was just so big. Some of the throws he made against San Francisco when they were down 7-0, like impressive throws where he understands now it's okay to throw the ball away and doesn't need to live and die on every single play. Yes. That not every play needs to be a touchdown, that I can throw it away and we can live to fight another day. And then there's also times where he just knows that he's hot. And then he's like, I can put a ball wherever I want. He's got that. He's always had, he's been able to make throws that very few guys can make. He has the arm talent to be within the Rodgers and the Mahomes, level of arm throws. Yeah. It's just a matter of understanding what he has to do. And that goes back to Jenna. You make a good point. Before the season, he said that he thought he had more answers to questions this year. That was the thing he said. He goes, well, how do you feel more prepared? Well, I know what I'm going to see this year, and I know the answers to the questions.
Yeah. By the way, speaking of arm talent, how far could he throw the ball
in the
air
of the stadium
in Denver? Seriously,
1,000%.
I mean, they're going to be back to the goal line, and he's going to let one fly.
That's so funny.
We'll see
it's been fun, and I think the reason so many Bills fans are probably annoyed or frustrated with people jumping on the bandwagon is that they
weren't there for the
struggle. Like, it was the laughing stock, like Josh Allen or the Bills in general. So I can understand a little of the bitterness. Like,
but it should make it a little sweeter. That you didn't it's not like the Bills went out and signed Patrick Mahomes as a free agent. Like, this was the guy they picked, they brought in, they've been building this. And I think they're a unique team in the league. This is like old school progression, starting almost like that 5-year plan, and it's hit in year 3. And it's, it's not a flash in the pan. It does look like something that's really established because they've done a good job with it. Mm-hmm. And I got to tell you, from 20,000 feet looking at it, man, the way they have just changed the perception in the league of the Buffalo Bills is massive. It's one thing to have the hot takers going, everybody wants to play in Green Bay because Aaron Rodgers is there. Okay, right. Maybe it's whatever. I don't know if that's the case. But in Buffalo now, nobody talks about the bad weather. Oh, they showed the snow the other day. But those things become nothing anymore. It's like the Bills are good. People like being there. You win. And they'll pay you. So it's a pretty good combination.
Yeah. I do want to touch on really fast just the defense, because they've obviously been a part of this streak really that the Bills have been on. I mean, Dan, I know we talked about earlier on, a lot of struggles, the tackling, fundamentally speaking, but they've really turned a corner.
Confidence is a hell of a drug. This team has got its swagger back. This team now understands. Micah Hyde and a lot of the guys have been saying they've gelled, and I think the big thing is that they've been saying recently is that it was hard to adjust with this COVID league, and that they haven't been able to spend as much time together off the field and all of those things in meetings. None of that stuff really happens. And so I think that this was a team that is now figuring out how to play in this unique 2020 season, and they're starting to make plays. Like there's just no other way to get around it. It's not I feel like I've asked Sean McDermott before, you talk about fundamentals. Is it more than fundamentals? Is it something else? And I just feel like they're making plays. Levi Walls comes up with a pick. Taron Johnson comes up with a pick 6. Guys are getting pressure. They're just playing better. When they weren't playing well, it was I don't know if there's anything wrong besides they're just not playing well.
Yeah. And they've been getting contributions. They're healthy. I got to tell you, you look around the league, their defense is healthy. Really, let's be honest, their whole team is healthy. They do a great job. This is really 2 years in a row. They've had some things, you lose Milano, but come on, they're healthy. John Brown, yes, I get it. But, teams have lost multiple guys, multiple linemen, multiple people. And the Bills put their best players out there on defense. And I'm going to say something, and I'll stop short of the hot take. I'll say this, not named Trey. Look at you two. Jordan Poyer is the best player on that defense.
He's playing out of his mind.
Yeah.
Oh, Dan doesn't like it.
No, I agree. I think what he's done on different areas of the field. I think you're referring to his blitzing, his tackling and the run stopping, his coverage. I agree. I think that's
and the dude plays special teams too. He's down there making tackles on kicks.
That's crazy.
Yep.
Yeah. So I think he's having a great year, and he's a great safety. Unlike the linebacker in Seattle, I get that in every time. Jamal Adams is a great linebacker, great pass rusher. Jordan Poyer's a safety. Sorry, Jamal. I know you'll probably be calling me out on InstaFace.
You got Nick Wright. You got Jamal Adams now. Mike, you just love a good
I know.
Fight. All right, make sure to check in on buffaloplus.com for more Bills information as they get ready to take on the Denver Broncos out west. For Mike Catalana and Dan Fetes, I'm Jenna Cottrell. Thank you so much for listening or watching on Buffalo Plus on YouTube. Make sure to subscribe. We appreciate it. We'll catch you this weekend.